Hey the internet, this is Luck. I carry with me an ancient curse that fills my every waking moment with thoughts about MMO design. I'd like to share some with you now. This week I watched a talk by EVE Online executive producer Andy Nordgren about the differences between designing for users and designing for participants. The distinction is admittedly subtle, but once you see it everywhere. In what would be considered the AAA MMO design space, the focus is very much on how the player interacts with the game directly. Quest chains, instance dungeons, and battlegrounds, raid finder, so on. They're all tools that allow players or users, if we have a design hat on, to engage with the content being offered by the software. I know software sounds awfully clinical, but I want to be clear about what I'm talking about. In EVE Online, and in other games as well, the goal of the design is to facilitate players interacting with each other. The players are participants in something larger than themselves, or even the game, really. The focus has moved beyond how a user interacts with the software to how users, plural, interact with each other. This shift in the center of gravity is what allows the population of the game of New Eden to make headlines in mainstream press with what they do. I'm sure that I'm preaching to the choir with this, but the talk is absolutely worth watching. If you've ever struggled to articulate why you think MMOs that put player interaction at their core are doing something right. In case it's not obvious, my casual flirtation with EVE Online has continued. The game itself isn't all as scary as it may seem at first glance. In my opinion, it actually has a lot in common with other games you may be more familiar and comfortable with. It's just a little under the surface. It's a game that asks you to feel the fear but do it anyway. And I think one of the games that EVE has more in common with that you might think is Guild Wars 2, believe it or not. Both games are set up in a way that is meant to encourage players to engage with as many different aspects of the game as possible. Although one is set towards a user-based relationship while the other is set towards a participant-based relationship. We talk a lot about satisfying different types of players. We like to put players into categories like explorers, crafters, killers even, achievers and the like, but judging by what some of the most popular games available tell us, this isn't quite the case when we're sat in front of the raw data. After the announcement of the first Guild Wars 2 expansion, while being asked about possible changes to the World v World game type specifically, Colin Johansson and Mike O'Brien were quick to point out that most Guild Wars 2 players will at least dip into every content type available. Meanwhile, at the EVE FanFest this year, we found out that most players didn't spend every day locked in battle with with thousands of others. In fact, the majority of players split their time pretty evenly across the activities that are available to them. This is also true for both the top and bottom end when it comes to time played. So, if anyone ever asks what EVE and Guild Wars 2 have in common, you can tell them this, as you're passing them on the street, and hope they're not in a position to cross-examine you too much. The point is that regardless of the depth of the systems, or how hardcore we think a certain type of player is, once we're in a game, our actions are surprisingly uniform. It's our attitudes to it that differ. Yes, there are players who heavily specialise, obviously, and players who like to push the systems as far as they'll go. I love those guys, they're insane. We talk a lot about the importance of hardcore players, those top tier raiders and such, as we, the people who talk about these things, tend to think of ourselves in that way. We often forget the importance of all those people who just like playing the game in a more easygoing, relaxed way. Or worse, we think of them as some kind of second-class citizen and call them names on forums, which is awful. One issue with the application of this data is it really does encourage design to be extremely wide but awfully shallow at the same time. Anyone who's followed World of Warcraft over the years can tell you, even in that game, there's been a significant foreshortening when it comes to time investment required, particularly time spent organising. It's difficult for some of us to see what the benefits are to this. We know that the best times to be had in these games are the times when not much is happening at all. We ride our mounts in circles around the capital. We dance on mailboxes. We hold RP weddings, which are always always fun, guaranteed fun. We do all these things while we wait for that last healer spot to be filled. We just, we hope that we'll get to actually play the game at some point that night. It's the fun of getting ready to have fun it's been sacrificed, and the reason for that is to streamline the user experience when interacting with the software. Again, that's a very clinical way of looking at it, but that's the nature of these decisions. That's the perspective these decisions are being made from. And we have a habit of blaming certain players for this, when in reality, it's the only logical progression, it's the only logical conclusion of a core design philosophy that's been in place since day one, since before we as the players even heard of the game, before we knew it was ever going to exist. So now newer games are in something of a quandary. With reduced investment, the scope and the scale of games that are coming out, it has to be dialed back by necessity, which means the pool of content available can't be as wide, and the design philosophy of games that have come before is just not sustainable. So the answer is to make it deeper, to create variety through the complexity of human interactions, giving players the tools to make themselves the content. Give a man a fish and all that. The best way of doing this is to look for a culture of design built around participation rather than consumption. When I play the game, will I be talking about what happened to the game? Will the developers be the story of the game? Or will I be talking about what happened to me in the game? Or even better, will I be talking about what happened to us, what happened to me and my friends while we were engaged with the game? We can see this trend in the design of upcoming games. I think it's very encouraging. It's obviously something that people in the industry have acknowledged and really taken to heart. We call it a move towards more sandbox principles, and I think that's definitely part of it, but it's not the whole story. For my money, the games that survive and thrive will be those games that do the best job of embracing participant-based design goals. Not because this type of design is intrinsically better. I'm not making any kind of value judgment on this. I'm pointing out that these games no longer have the luxury. They don't have the option of casting as wide a net as possible. I'm also not saying that you have to like it, but if you don't acknowledge it, you're going to have a bad time. So what do you think? Do you find the nature of participant-based design exciting? Are you going to be watching the talk? If you have seen it, what did you think of it? I I really thought it was great. I think the approach to game design from CCP on EVE Online is really a sight to behold, and I'm a real fanboy for the way they do their thing. So, hit like if you think this discussion is worth having, if you got anything out of it. Subscribe for many and varied things and stuff. And I'll see you again real soon. Bye!